The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Metroid. We all know how awesome these games are. They're all trailblazers. But one series, and one particular game in that series, has kind of been lost in the sands of time. A game with very few faults that I feel deserves to be in the conversation when discussing Nintendo's greatest games. And, in a similar vein to Thousand Year Door, a game whose style and substance I'd love to see Nintendo return to in the future. That game is Wario Land 4. Wario, Mario's sinister counterpart, debuted in Super Mario Land 2 on the Game Boy in 1992. A bizarre-looking and stouter version of Mario, Wario would go on to usurp the Mario Land series. Wario Land would release in 1993 to much acclaim. Starring Wario as the game's protagonist, it deviates quite significantly away from any Super Mario game in terms of gameplay by utilising Wario's muscle mass to barge and throw things. The Wario Land series would spawn a few further games, including, in 2001, Wario Land 4, released as a launch title for the Game Boy Advance. This game's plot is a little thin and sees Wario on a quest for more treasure, his favourite thing, this time finding a pyramid inside another pyramid. I've come up with 5 words that I feel perfectly encapsulate why Wario Land 4 is nothing short of a masterpiece, despite its relative obscurity compared with more well-known Nintendo hits. Let's start with the first word, creativity. Wario Land 4 has a kind of unhinged creativity when it comes to everything, from enemy design to level design. There's a truly bizarre atmosphere that's achieved through the use of contrast. There's a lot of cute little enemies and NPCs around, but at the same time there's some really sinister music. The main hub world is packed with decaying skeletons, and plenty of enemies are kinda gross and can be found blowing snot bubbles out of their noses. Wario Land 4 is like a fever dream, throwing so many different ideas together. But everything about the game feels complementary, and nothing feels out of place. Contrast it with a Mario, Kirby or Donkey Kong game and Wario Land 4 feels completely out of control. The bosses are testament to that, almost defying description. They're so weird and I love it. And that's not to mention the NPCs, particularly the item shop dude, who can assist Wario in battles by doing various different things like kissing the enemy. The music is also fantastic, ranging wildly from Sega Genesis sounding synth rock to peaceful classical sounding music. It's a wild ride. And just to top off the weirdness, there's a bunch of CDs that can be found throughout the game that unlock tracks that you can listen to. What are these unlockable tracks? Well, not the level music, but seemingly other random pieces of music. You can listen along with a headbanging Wario. Brilliant. That creativity comes to life thanks to the game's indisputable sense of style. The second word I'd use to describe Wario Land 4. The big, bold, colourful pixelated graphics are reminiscent of some of the best games the SNES era had to offer. Nintendo crafted a game that's bursting with colour, but none of the details of the beautiful sprite work are ever lost, thanks to everything having this bold, black, comic book style outline. It's a game that looks both appealing and gorgeous. Wario Land 4 also has an unsanitized, rough design style to it as well. That unsanitized look is shared with the previous 3 Wario Land installments, but in full colour, that style finally feels fully realised. There seems to be a kind of Ren and Stimpy, never the same face twice philosophy in the art direction of Wario's character sprites. Unlike a lot of other gaming characters, Wario is amazingly expressive, and his face is constantly gurning or pulling some sort of fun, unique pose. Wario is like the antithesis of Kirby. Kirby gets a lot of mileage out of his cuteness, while Wario gets even more comedic mileage out of his grotesqueness. The next word is innovation. As mentioned earlier, Wario Land 4 was a launch title for the Game Boy Advance, and it immediately pushed the capabilities of the GBA hardware way beyond what was possible on the Game Boy Color. As a flagship game for the launch of the GBA, Wario Land 4 was mightily impressive. The smog effects, the rainfall, the underwater effects, at the time they represented an impressive attention to detail never before seen on a Nintendo handheld. The weird soundtrack I mentioned earlier actually also featured a couple of tracks with vocals, which is technically quite impressive. Admittedly, the vocals are compressed, but it's still mightily cool and only added to the unique feeling Wario Land 4 cultivated. The game also had a curious collection of 3 minigames that can be played in order to earn currency for the item shop. Wario's Home Run Derby, a retro-looking baseball game, the Wario Hop, an endless runner, and finally Wario's Roulette, a face-matching roulette game. They're all quite fun in their own right, particularly the latter two, but these minigames also feel like a precursor to the later WarioWare series because of their wacky execution and reflex testing speed. Variety is the spice of life, they say, and it's also my next word. And if there's one thing to celebrate more than any other in Wario Land 4, it's the variety of the levels. Not just in terms of aesthetic, but in terms of design as well. There's a real mixture of vertically and horizontally oriented levels. Some levels are simple A to B affairs, others are more maze-like and huge. Each level makes heavy use out of one of Wario's many specific transformations or moves, ensuring none of these abilities feel redundant. Some levels have a unique gimmick, and the best levels in the game are those that have a fully realised gimmick. Levels like Pinball Zone or Domino Row are masterful examples of this, where you have to use, well, pinballs and dominoes to get to the end of the levels. A lot of games throw half-hearted gimmicks into each level, but in Wario Land 4, each level's gimmick is completely baked into the level design. It results in a game that tests a wide range of abilities and playing styles, and each level feels completely new and fresh. You never know what you're gonna get. It's a level design masterclass. But don't just take my word for it. Video game writer Daniel Johnson has a near 800-word book on the topic. Finally, challenge. Wario Land 4 has 3 difficulty levels, but even the easiest feels a little bit more taxing than your average Mario game. It serves as a nice, slightly harder alternative to some of Nintendo's easier games that doesn't rely solely on tricky platforming. Wario Land 4 is kind of one of those games that's as difficult as you make it. There's a pretty sizable array of collectibles to be found in each level, and locating all of them can be quite the gauntlet. It's up to you as the player to choose whether you want to go whole hog and get everything, or have a more leisurely experience. The game has a number of puzzle rooms, requiring you to solve an environmental puzzle for a giant treat. These little rooms are entirely optional, but they help to break up the game, and some of them are actually quite tough brain teasers. The truth is, Wario Land 4 feels more challenging than it actually is, because it creates a sense of anxiety and dread quite often. Every level ends with Wario hitting the frog bomb clock, which then ominously ticks down to 0, accompanied by creepy music and a warped overlay. Hearing the countdown music creates the exact same sensation as hearing that iconic Sonic the Hedgehog drowning music, except in Wario Land 4, you have to hear it in every single level. Wario Land 4 was, unfortunately, the apex of Wario's platforming career. Despite a very favourable critical reception and positive sales figures, Nintendo would drag Wario in a number of different directions after Wario Land 4, and none of them would be anywhere near as good. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about the WarioWare series of games, for which Wario is probably now more well known. I adore some of the WarioWare installments, and talking about them is probably a job for another video. I'm referring to this trio of games: Wario World on the GameCube, Wario Master of Disguise on the DS, and Wario Land Shake It on the Wii. None of these games would quite capture the charm and atmosphere that Wario Land 4 so effortlessly oozed. Wario World was a slightly awkward jump into 3D. Not a bad game, but certainly a forgettable one. Wario Master of Disguise was Wario Land 4's spiritual successor. It retained some of the kookiness of Wario Land 4, as well as placing a heavy emphasis on utilising different transformations. But the levels were overly large, and that, combined with an overly clean visual style, resulted in it feeling rather charmless. Finally, Wario Land Shake It represented a valiant but ultimately flawed attempt to relaunch the series. It's a fun game, there's no doubt about that, but once again the hand-drawn visuals were far inferior to Wario Land 4's art direction. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would love for Nintendo to give us thirsty Wario fans one last hurrah. Give us Wario Land 5. How did Nintendo recapture that same sense of wonder and beauty that Wario Land 4 exhumed? Well, how about a wholesale return to Wario Land 4's visual style? Capcom did it with Mega Man 9 and 10, Sonic kinda did it with Sonic Mania, or as an alternative, I'm sure there's a way to craft a 2D platformer oozing with charm and reminiscent of Wario Land 4, but with a more modern look. Nintendo pulled this off stylishly with the Donkey Kong franchise after all. Until that day comes, feel free to boot up Wario Land 4, bask in its glory, and pass on the message that it truly is Nintendo's forgotten masterpiece. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more video game mini analysis videos in the future. See you next time.